What is going on in the real estate market? Let's chat about it.
What are we hearing out in the marketplace about mortgage rates, and will they keep rising?
I think it's a huge concern of buyers right now of mortgage rates rising as well as sellers. And what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing in the market is that there's a chance they will keep going up, but it looks like everything is going to cool off a little bit from how much they rose earlier this year, that we're not going to see these double rises like we have seen this year. And there's no crystal ball. So it looks like we're through the end of this year. They might keep going up, but we could be close to the peak. Hopefully, fingers crossed. It's not so crazy.
Well, just because the feds are raising rates doesn't mean it. We just don't know the impact that it's going to have on mortgage rates. The
Yeah.
Fed does not dictate mortgage rates, but they certainly impact mortgage rates.
Yeah. And the 10-year treasury rate, which is something that does generally coincide with mortgage rates, actually went down today. So
It
that could
was
be a
nice to
positive
see
thing.
it was nice to see a little dip.
Yeah. They are much higher though. I mean, they over the last 50 years, I think this is the first time that rates have doubled within a 12-month period. So I feel it. I feel a lot of empathy for buyers out there right now. And I also, a lot of those people who couldn't buy when the market was so crazy because they couldn't offer 100,000 over asking on a property and give everything away. I do think there's a lot of opportunity out there for people, as long as you're checking your monthly payment and you're safe. Are you feeling that too?
We are absolutely seeing that and feeling that. But I think we have to keep in mind that, things were artificial for the last couple of years. When have we had a global pandemic that we remember? And the government was printing money to keep inflation low, which means rates stayed low because our rates follow inflation. And that's why we're seeing the increase right now. We had historical low rates in the threes at the beginning of the year, and that double-digit growth has certainly impacted sales. But we're still seeing in our market, we're still seeing buyers and sellers out in
Yeah.
the marketplace. People are still moving for jobs. People are relocating. People are increasing their family size. Unfortunately or fortunately, people are getting divorced, which also means need to be sold and homes need to be bought. So there's a market for everybody out there. This just may not be the market for everyone at this time.
I agree with that completely. I think it's really case by case right now, more so than maybe the advice we've been given or giving over the past year and a half of if you can buy, get in, lock in these low mortgage rates. Now it is, let's take a look at your scenario. Let's sit down and have a conversation and see if it is right for you.
100%
Um, Something
agree.
that's crazy in our market too, which I'm not sure where you're at, but our rent has gone up a lot over the past few years, and our average rent here in San Diego is $3,000 a month, and that varies from place to place. Some places it's more, some it's less. That includes condos and single family homes. So if you're looking at waiting, average that, factor that into your cost. If we go down 5% in home values, even the amount of money you're spending on rent is probably more than what you're going to lose in natural depreciation over the next year.
Well, and it's 100% interest. You're
Yeah.
paying somebody else's mortgage. And again, it's case by case, unique to the individual. And in my case here, I like to refer somebody to my preferred lender. And I like them to go deep dive with them into their finances, into the things that I don't need to be nosy about. And
Sure.
I'm on a need to know basis. So if anybody has questions about what to do, can they afford it? Is it part of their goals and dreams? Let's connect them into our favorite lenders and they can have those conversations.
Absolutely. I like this slide a lot about mortgage rates just having upward pressure through the end of this year. I do think they are going to continue to have pressure. And this is just one of the great reasons why, when we say there's no crystal ball, it's if you can afford to do something now and homeownership is in your goal bucket, then talk to a lender, take it from there, see if it is affordable, and keep in mind that rates might continue to rise and we might see some softening next year.
Inflation is the highest that it's been over the last 40 years. And as long as inflation remains high, the feds are going to continue to raise rates to reduce spending. So yes, it is most likely that we will see upward pressure through the end of 2022. But what happens when inflation comes down? When inflation comes down, what we've seen in history is that rates also come down. So again, if we look at history to do what history has done in the past, we're going to go up a little bit more to come down a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Psychology of Money. I think it's wonderful, and it was my number one read from this year. It changed the way I look at money and investing.
Good.
So if you haven't, do it. But they talk in that book about how the way we invest, it's generational, and how I'm part of the millennial generation. They're the biggest section of home buyers right now. And we don't know what inflation is or weren't expecting it at the very least because it wasn't something we had ever lived through before. And now that inflation is hitting, it's when you had just said, oh, it's the biggest inflation we've seen in 40 years. There's a good amount of people who are out there buying and selling real estate who have never been through a time like this before. And I think it's normal to feel uncertain.
Well, and I think maybe we all should have paid attention in econ class a little bit more. I certainly didn't, but I'm feeling it now and learning quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had mentioned earlier that this has been the largest increase that we've had in 12 months. The fastest growth of interest rates in any time in history over the last 12 months. So we started just over 3 at the beginning of the year, and we are coming in hot, just right around 7 right now, with the anticipation of another uptick. So again, everything that we're seeing is to get inflation back under control.
Mm-hmm.
But we do believe that most of that is behind us, and come 2023, we'll start leveling out.
Talks about recession in a way excite me a little bit in when we look at the housing market, because historically, even if we don't know that a recession means housing prices will continue, in the last 5 or 6 recessions that we've had, we have actually seen a decrease in interest rates. So there is some affordability that does come with going into a recession if we're trying to look at the bright side of what's happening.
So this slide shows that the economists in the beginning of the year through October and early in the year, about 18% of economists thought that we had a recession coming in the next 12 months. As we get up through the months and into October, we see that the likelihood and the expectation from the economists increases to 63%. So while in real estate, we might actually start feeling it now, it doesn't seem like consumers everywhere have started to feel it just yet. But we're hoping it's shallow and we're hoping it's short.
I think that's a great point, that some people have not been feeling it, and that will be a new wave that comes to us. One, go for it.
Give me just a second. So for buyers out there that are really crossing your fingers and holding out and thinking that you've got a really big, deep discount coming in purchasing your home, I think this is a slide that is super important, because really only once or twice have we seen housing in a recession decline. And the one that most of us remember is 2008, all the way through about 2012, when if you had the opportunity to scoop up a house at a discount, it doubled over in about 5 years after that. We're not seeing that as the model here. The lending rules have changed. Lending standards are higher. Most people have equity in their homes. And when you have equity in the home, it means you have choices. So sellers, I don't believe they're going to come out the gate and say, gosh, I really need to sell at a deep discount. Buyers, really look at the value that you're seeing and the history. Again, once again, history tells us through the last 6 recessions, only 2 had declines and only 1 had a really steep decline.
And that steep decline was really led by the housing industry.
Correct. Hang tight, because it is the last 6 recessions that have shown us, in a time of high inflation, in order to tame inflation, and when we get out of the recession, mortgage rates will drop. Housing is almost always a key part of getting us out of a recession. Housing is a huge indicator of what's going to happen moving forward. And again, history shows us that mortgage rates have come down in the last 6 recessions.
This slide, I think, is particularly important for the San Diego market because we have seen demand really, really fall back. But it's actually kind of funny because our inventory is still so down. The story of the pandemic of inventory is low, there's not enough houses on the market is still really ringing true. And though our demand has fallen, we have actually seen a slight seller's market that continues to stay here. So I think the message from this that you'll have to keep waiting if you're expecting is very true. And if you are looking at selling, then you maybe want to make a move sooner than later because as we move into next year, the chances of it remaining a seller's market, are they're there, but we're seeing more and more into the buyer's market as we move into next year.
Yeah, I think this is super hyper local, and you need to dig into what's happening in your own market. So here in Clark County, we are actually seeing a little bit of an uptick in inventory. So we have 2.3 months, whereas in the heat of pandemic, we were down to under a full month of inventory. But what does that mean? 3 months is generally a neutral market, not a buyer's market, not a seller's market, and 2.3 is actually indicative of what we were seeing in the first quarter of 2019. So it's a little more normalized for us here. We have sellers that still want top dollar. They're still holding onto their price. And we have buyers that are looking for deep discounts, and they're not matching up. And so what I've been telling my people is don't be afraid to negotiate right now. This is a time to definitely make the offer. And to my sellers, I say, do not get offended by the offer that comes through. It just may not be the right buyer for you at this time, but it'll also teach us what the market is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen? What are the pricing forecasts for 2023 and price appreciation? We have some going up and we have some going down, but I think if we average those, we're looking at really flat in 2023 for growth. Why is that? And why does everybody have a little bit different number? Some of it is coming based upon who supports new construction and who supports existing home sales. And in new construction right now, I would say if you're looking for a discount, that's where we are seeing discounts. Some of those companies are held by shareholders. Shareholders are not going to be too keen on them holding on to inventory. They've got a lot of money wrapped up into these homes, and they've put some building on pause while the economy is kind of on pause and why inflation is high and why rates are high. But as far as existing homes go, I think in existing homes, we're going to see just a slight bump or flat throughout 2023.
I totally agree. So, including the big banks, thinking that, we might see depreciation over the next year, especially when it comes to new builds, and the average of the forecasts looking at probably a flat market between existing and new build home sales. If you even take into account the big banks saying we might go down 5.5% on average across the country next year. Yet in 2024, most companies, most big banks, and most of the top economists are still predicting that we will see appreciation. And I think the key to this is if you're a buyer out there looking for a property, you have to ask yourself, what does it really mean to you if the value of your home drops 5.5% next year? Unless you're trying to flip your property or you have to absolutely sell, it probably isn't going to make a difference. It's not going to impact your monthly payment. It's not going to impact anything about your house unless you want to sell it. So if you can hang on 5-10 years, you will see the natural appreciation over the course of time because we know that time in the market is always better than trying to time the market. So it comes back to seeing as an individual if it's right for you to buy. And when we look at the rent and we look at how expensive it is over time, the amount of money you're going to spend on rent here, say in 5 years, it's going to be over $150,000 on average. Instead, you could be gaining that natural appreciation, even if we see a dip next year, over the course of 5 to 10 years that you will recover later. And I think it's just something that's really important to look at. And if you want to be an investor and you want to go into it a little bit more strategically, this is only natural appreciation. And there's something else that's called forced appreciation. And I recommend this to anyone who's willing to do it. go into a house, don't buy the nicest house on the block, buy something that needs a little bit of work, and add in some forced appreciation through sweat equity, through updating your home. That will kind of circumvent the negative numbers that we may see next year. This
Like,
one is just another like during the 2008 crash, we saw depreciation for 5 consecutive years, and it's just saying we don't expect to see that this time around.
so the big question I think on everybody's mind is, will we see foreclosures increase this year? And if you are looking at the media and listening to the media, which can be clickbait, the answer is yes. But the answer is only yes based upon what numbers you are looking at. So deep dive into these articles, because in 2020 and 2021, we had a foreclosure moratorium going on. And so you see 2021 with historically low foreclosures. Anything from a historical low is going to be an increase in foreclosure. And that is how I think people are getting the misconception that we are hitting into foreclosure season. Will there be some? Sure, there are always some, but we still haven't even hit the national average. What do you think, Carolyn?
I think I've seen headlines and I can predict the headlines that are going to be like, oh my gosh, there's, 100,000 or 500,000 even more foreclosures this year than there was in 2021. And if you look at this, 500,000 plus 151 just brings us back to a normal average market like we saw before the pandemic. So I think for data like this, you're right, it's clickbait, and it's very important to really take a look at what we were in 2.9 million foreclosures during the recession, the Grand Recession. So
just a little more data. Just 0.4% of the 58.2 million mortgages in the United States are considered to be heading towards default. And there is a statistical number that 1% is not super high risk. It's very normal. And here we are with just 0.4 of that number in our eyesight.
I also think when we look at this and saying 0.4%, it still is 214,000 homeowners, and we both totally feel for those people. And reach out, contact us if you are in that downward slope and maybe you lost a job and something bad is happening and you are facing a potential foreclosure. Contact a real estate agent, get your options out there, because most people have so much equity, or at least enough equity in their houses, that they don't have to go into foreclosure. There are ways around it. There's programs. There's people who will actually buy out your debt and help you turn the house around that we know and we work with and can connect you with.
Agreed. And down at the bottom, 91% of homeowners, or 91% of those people who are facing foreclosure, have some equity in their home. You have choices. You don't have to give your home back to the bank. I think the bank probably doesn't want it either.
Same.